Welcome to the WildFly developer channel on YouTube. I'm Emmanuel and I'm going to talk about YAML configuration extension with WildFly. So we are going to demonstrate how you can use YAML to extend your WildFly configuration instead of using GBoss Clear or simply editing XML the XML file. The difference here being that the XML file is never modified at all, and all the customization is done in a YAML or several YAML files. So what we are going to what I'm going to show you is an application that is going GMS application that is going to connect to a remote broker, and all the configuration to connect to the remote broker is in the YAML file. So the first step is to enable the YAML support in WildFly, because this is currently an experimental feature, so it's not enabled by default. You have to manually enable it. Well, so first step first is just to unzip WildFly. So let's do it. And then we have to create the proper structure to enable the feature. So we need so the feature is discovered through a service loader, so we need to add the folder in the AS controller, the GBoss AS controller module, and then create the proper service file. So now the YAML configuration extension is available to WildFly, and we can use it. So the first step we are going to demonstrate is to start Artemis as a remote broker. Here we are. So here we have an Artemis. Artemis console. You can see just with a DL queue, an Explorer queue, and nothing there. Okay. So now, what I'm going to do is start WildFly. So cd WildFly bin. So I'm passing the YAML file using a full path, but you can also use it will be able to detect YAML files that are defined in the standalone configuration folder. So and then you can just use the name you want to use. And you can pass several files using the path separator in between them. Okay, so let's start WildFly. And while it's starting, I'm going to show you what's in the YAML file. So here we have the WildFly configuration, which is the root point of entry of the YAML file. Then we define a remote outbound socket binding to connect to the remote Artemis here. And then we configure the subsystem, the messaging subsystem. So we are adding here a remote connector to the remote Artemis that is going to use the socket bindings we have just defined, and a pull connection factory here that is using this connector, and of course has its own GND bindings. And just for the simplicity of the application, just not to have to change things, here we are defining the default bindings for the GMS connection factory to be this remote factory, and also the remote connection factory to be used by EGBs, by MDBs. And something more here, which is quite specific, is the use of the remove tag, so that we can remove the resource, in that case the default embedded broker. So now basically what we have is a WildFly standalone full without an embedded broker. what I'm going to show you now is that, well, here if we connect to it, so let's use a console. Okay, and here if we look into, well, first step is the socket binding groups, remote destination socket binding groups. You can see that there is a remote Artemis entry. So we can see that the socket binding has been defined, and if we look into the subsystem messaging and we do a read resource recursive, you can see that we have, well, let's not delve into the subsystem configuration, but we have the pull condition factory, the remote condition factory that we created here, and we have the remote connector here, and you can see that the default broker, the server, is not defined at all. Okay, what we can do also to check things is just there is a read config as XML option that we can do to see the effective standalone .xml. And here, let's open the resulting file. Okay, so if we go to the messaging, here you can see that we have just our remote connection factory and the remote connector. Now if I go into so let's leave the console, and if I do a less standalone, so we are using the standalone full.xml here, and we look into the messaging, you can see that we still have the initial configuration. So the standalone full.xml hasn't been modified at all. Okay, so just let's deploy our application. So into okay, here we can see, okay, the application being deployed, and if we look into the Artemis console now, you can see that a queue has been created on the topic. So we have the unicast queue and our multicast topic, and you can just see, so it is a basic Hello World MDB application. So if we do this, so we are sending 5 messages to the queue, and if you look into here, we have sent and received those 5 messages. In the same way, we can use topic, of course, and here we have the trace for the 5 topics that have been sent. And you know that so we have been able to demonstrate how to create how to configure and made a big change to the configuration, so to be able to connect to a remote broker instead of just the embedded one without editing any XML. And this is important because now you can see that. Let's stop it. I'm going also to stop Artemis, and I can start it that way. And so now we start it properly, and here we found just this was just to show you that it is the same same application as what we have for the Hello World MDB, but the difference is here we have all the traces that the ActiveMQ core server has been started, and if we look into it, you can see that we have the proper traces. Yeah. So we have learned how we can use YAML to customize our WildFly configuration without having to edit or even change the standalone XML file. I hope you enjoy this. See you soon. Bye.